Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Cocoron. In the last part we started off the game and now we're heading on from the hill on top of the screen over to, I forget if I go to Milk Sea? Yeah, we do. Milk Sea is admittedly one of the only levels you can benefit from another type of body for one of your heroes that I don't end up honestly using, which is the boat type, which allows you to float on the surface of any water type surfaces in the game. Not that there's many of them. It's more or less only in levels directly connected to Milk Sea, which technically there's 5 of, but oh well. By the way, that smiley face there I believe was the one up. In terms of the bodies I don't show off though in the game, it's by and large just that and the tank. Because I do use a lower to the ground thing like the tank eventually. I use the buggy, but the tank itself has a special ability that we don't end up seeing, and that's that it doesn't slide down slopes. Which admittedly can be a useful one in certain stages because slopes are so inherently common in the game's design. It's just a matter of that also means you're probably going to have a very high weight stat, meaning you're probably not going to be jumping too high. And there's at least 3 levels in the game where you're gonna really want to be able to jump high, or at least hover in some regard. One of those is one of the very last stages. Again, we'll get into that later. Now, last part we made this particular character, which I may not have so totally coyly named after a character from Breath of the Wild. I don't know what you're talking about. And their weapon is one I mentioned last part. This is the flower. It's a very awkward weapon to use, but it's very powerful if you learn how to use it. Because you lob a grenade in the air, more or less, and when it lands, it explodes into flowers. Those flowers do damage more than once whenever they're on the target. I don't want to say it's per frame, like I believe I may have said last part, but it definitely can hit upwards of 3 to 5 times, depending on what power-up you get it at. And it gets so much larger by the end of its power-up cycle that it can envelop an entire boss's hitbox just about. It's debatably broken. I say debatably because its awkward throwing arc means it is difficult to use inherently compared to some of the other weapons in the game. Honestly, when it comes to like learning curve for the weapons, I'd say the best ones are the pencil, the baseball, the shuriken, and the this is probably the hardest of the easy ones in my eyes, the note, just because they cover such good ranges and they are relatively easy to process. Whereas, say, in a Mega Man type game like this, the only times you really get weapons that are lob type things like this are certain special weapons. And that being my main weapon, in my case especially with how much Mega Man I've played, can be a little off-putting. With that said, you do have to be a little bit strategic when it comes to using your characters in this game, as for a good while at the start of the game, and even going towards the last third, you're free to choose whichever character you want, and that by and large is true throughout the entire thing. But you're going to want to make sure you strategize when you use certain characters so you can get all of their weapons up to a certain level. As well, it's not required for, say, damage value reasons, like it would be in, say, Crystallis, where if you don't get a weapon up to a certain level, you're not doing damage, period. It does get to a point of your character's going to have such underpowered weapons that either bosses are going to be annoying or the enemy layouts are going to be very annoying. And thus making certain enemies and some characters just not as effective in the long run. Also, this is the water that you'd be hovering on top of. Well, not even water, it's milk. The penguins there are still really good for getting any eggs. Honestly, the penguins are some of the best enemies in the game for grinding up your weapons.
I'm Flint the Pirate, aren't you, Valley? If you can beat me, I'll tell you all about Princess Rua. Yeah.
Alright, so the boss of Milk Sea is not just a pirate, it's a pirate's entire ship. It's gonna move left and right, firing various enemies outside of it, be it skeleton pirates. Later on I think it fires outright cannonballs. The pirates do notably track onto the direction you are from them when they land on the ground. Hover, again, comes in pretty handy here. It can fire anchors out at an arc trying to land on top of you. Honestly, I find these much easier to dodge because I don't have to worry about them afterwards. And then there's barrels, which I think roll after you. Cannons that explode in either direction. This thing's got a surprising amount of attacks for something that just moves left and right. You do need to be a bit careful, though, because since characters can have various HP counts, your health on the top can be a little bit misleading as to how much damage you're taking out of your total. But that's Milk Sea. It's not much of a water level.
I saw the fairies of the forest kidnap someone, but I don't know whether it was Rua or not. And now my ship. My ship?
Cool. Sorry about the ship. You could have just told me that from the start, though. So, I'm at the point, since it's been a while since I recorded this footage, where I don't remember which character I'm making next. I remember the ultimate characters I make, but I don't remember which one this is going to be. Let's see, who am I going for this time? Is it time for... Okay, wait, I know exactly who we're making now. It's time for us to make probably the biggest risk taker out of this group in my eyes, barring maybe the one I make at the end of the part from memory. As I go for body types that don't really have any benefit, like the question mark, which is very low weight, which means it can jump high, but it also means this thing's fragile. And I believe I end up giving this particular character the boomerang weapon, which is sort of like the shuriken, in that it travels more or less in a straight line from where you fire it. The big thing is, they also come back to where you shoot them. Not where you are, where you shoot them. And as you power it up, it gets larger, you get more of them, the usual thing, really. I should note, by the way, I forgot to mention it last part. I believe the amount of power-ups you need to get a weapon to max depends on the weapon in particular, but every weapon has 5 levels. It's relatively consistent, but I want to say there's one that might take 1 or 2 more. The fun thing about the boomerang and the shuriken as well is, and this is more so prevalent for the shuriken than the boomerang, you can also spam it a good bit if you're right in front of an enemy's face. Also, you can travel back to the house. You never really need to, though. It's just in the case you maybe want a shorter stage. Again, don't really know why you would, but it's there. With that said, though, we are going to easily the worst stage in the game when it comes to platforming. Well, out of the main stages, at least. Again, there's one final stage in particular that is a nightmare. In that, if you have a character who is high weight or is generally like the buggy type class, you are not going to be having a good time in the next area. As there's a lot of very high jumps, and also some that are relatively precise. Honestly, anywhere we're going from the next section is hell. As the starting half of the level, from where you go from Starstead Hill, I believe is the level we're going to, is just rough. With that said, I should note, barring you heading into the final stages, because you technically have a choice on when you do that, more on that next part, I believe, you can theoretically farm for max lives, max health for their health amount, and max weapons until you beat the game, more or less, because you can just backtrack through stages, and I believe enemies and their eggs respawn. So if you have the patience, you can max power up everyone. It's just a matter of, do you want to extend the game? Because at that point, from memory at least, I think this game is at a minimum 9 or 10 stages long. About as long as Mega Man 1. It's just that the levels are also a lot more longer and in-depth. Also, I hate these bucket moles because they're oddly like Metars / Metools, the helmet dudes from Mega Man, in that they only reveal themselves when you get super close to them. But the moment they reveal themselves, they're likely to shoot you before you can get a head in on them and destroy them. So watch out for them. Also, I believe this particular aesthetic is only present if you're passing through certain portions of the middle of the map from certain stages. Because there are some aesthetics that are oddly unique depending on where you're traveling from or to. And they're not always going to show up depending on what you do. Like, I think if you go to Starstead Hill from anywhere else, that house section just does not show up. Also, keep in mind those large eggs. They're random what they have right now. But there's one particular one to keep in mind later on in the game. Oh, hi, Clown Man stage from Mega Man 8. How are you doing? It is almost funny to me how much this mechanic is just that before that. You can notably shoot the trains to slow them down so you can use them as platforms to reach any eggs you want to. And they are really a little bit interesting with how they design the levels in this game, in that there are times where you'll see multiple eggs next to each other, but the only way you can reach some of them is if you have a low enough weight that you can jump high enough. And I like that they actively make your choices in the character creation matter in the stage design to that extent. Do I wish the stages could be a bit more based around certain things? Like, say, if you go to this area with a flyer, you're likely to get maybe more of this type of level than this? Yes, but that would have been absolute hell to program on the NES. And also, that'd just be a lot of stages to make, period. There's not many games that can get away with doing that sort of thing. Honestly, the only games that can in any consistent fashion are probably tabletops. Yeah, like that egg on the bottom of the screen right now. I can't get that with Tunk here because he's lightweight, yes, but he doesn't have any real special jumping that get up there really easily. Alright, welcome to the Starset Hill portion of Starset Hill. At least I think that's what this place is called. It's been a bit. The annoying thing with this is, while there's going to be some platforming that you have to do, yes, there are constant shooting stars raining down from the sky, and you can hit them to destroy them. I think even some of them will drop eggs if you do that. The more annoying thing about the stars is that whenever they collide with the ground, they send out 2 stars horizontally in either direction from the altitude that they collided with whatever. And dodging a lot of those can be a little bit troublesome with how many they can spawn at once. Thankfully, the game has some slowdown issues, so if there's enough going on screen, it's a bit easier to at least process what's happening, but it can still be a little rough to dodge. With that said, the Starset section of Starset Hill, whatever the hell the name of this stage is relatively short, as we're already on to the boss fight.
My name is Harvest Moon. I want to shine brighter than the stars in the night sky, more beautifully than the sun. That is my dream. Tunk, fight me!
Also, siege warning on this boss again because of the majorly black background from when we beat the boss. This fight's pretty simple. The moon will teleport across the stage, namely on the left and right, surrounding itself in stars, which it'll then shoot at you one at a time. It leaves itself really open the more stars it takes out, but it also teleports away somewhat randomly once the stars land, and from there it just loops around. You can be a bit careful because I believe it teleports in randomly from around the screen. It can be either the left, the center, or the right. But as long as you're quick on your feet, you're probably not going to get hit by it. It's not a very hard boss. I'd argue it might be the easiest boss in the game, just because it's the one that stays the most still. Because even the other ones beaten so far that I call easy, like the dragon, moving left to right in the last phase moving more rapidly can be a bit troublesome.
Forgive me. A strange wizard said he would grant my wish if I defeat you.
Odd, but okay. With that said, before we end things off, it's time to make our next character for the next stage. And if Tunk wasn't the risk taker for me, it's this one, because I genuinely am not a fan of the lower to the ground body types like the buggy, tank, boat, or question mark. I much prefer to have one of the flyers, and thankfully, there's enough body types in the game that you can have the game mostly be made of flyers. It's just a matter of preference at that point, really. Because I believe this is the one I go with the buggy on. Yes, it is, because I'm looking at that color palette. That looks right. And this is also when I give a relatively risky weapon. I give them the melody from memory. And this can be a troublesome one to work with, despite being also one of the easier ones to use if you're used to the type of weapon that it is. Because what the melody does is it flies straight forward in a line, while also moving up and down intermittently like a musical note along a musical score. Because that, it has some pretty good range, but hitting things precisely with it early on can be a nightmare. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 3, I believe we're going to go finish off the main 5 stages of sorts, and then get into sort of the middle third of the game. See you guys then.